Welcome to Biz Bites, brought to you by Com Together, helping businesses like yours build their brand through telling amazing stories to engage and grow audiences on multiple platforms. I hope you've had a chance to listen to part one of this interview on Biz Bites. Stay tuned now for part two. It's a very interesting idea, that being switched on about being present, because there are a lot of people, and I think particularly I imagine during COVID, where that experience was forced on people, where they were working, but they also had kids around them at home.
Yeah.
And that idea of whether you're present or not for which one, it is hard to that idea of multitasking is such a misnomer. We're all guilty of it at various times. And being a creative person, jumping from one thing to the next seems to be my a common occurrence. But I know what you mean. There's a point when you do need to make a choice to switch on. And I think that's not a decision that most people are consciously making.
No. And I really learnt that from my training. And I remember once when I was running a workshop, and there was about 60 people in the workshop, and there were teenagers and adults, and I was teaching accelerated learning in those days. So 2 minutes before I'm about to start the second day, a parent comes up to me and gives me an earful of what she thinks her daughter is learning about being independent, a whole bunch of other things. So she's going ying, 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 in my ear. And I agreed to disagree with her, and then I left. And from the time I went into the room till the time I got in front of everybody else, I had totally isolated that woman and her vitriol. In other words, I didn't let it carry with me to being in front of my audience, because I would have been half there. And so I've learned in my life, like if I'm coaching with someone, there is only one person in the world when I'm working with them, and that's them. That's all. I've learned how to put containers, or if you like, or boundaries around the things that I'm doing, rather than being attentive, being in two places at the same time. A German friend of mine has this cute phrase. He says, you can't dance at two weddings at the same time. Now, I don't know how they made that saying up, but it's pretty good. And so it's
a joint wedding, of course, then it breaks all the rules.
So I learned to be present when I'm doing something. So for example, when I was skydiving, I had to be fully present with what was going on, because if I missed something, it can actually be quite dangerous.
You can't be thinking about the next proposal if you're
no, you can't.
When you're plummeting down a few thousand feet.
No, you got to be fully there. You got to, this is what I do next, and this is what I do next, and that's what's going on. Can't afford to mess those things up. And I'm really glad that I learned these things even before I became a parent. So this was just in my basic training, and it's like mindfulness, but it's learning to be able to separate one context from another, and having some kind of ritual in between. It's called a contextual marker, where you mark out one context from another and become fully present in what you're doing. I'll give you another example of this. With my clients, I teach them time management, and that's a basic. You know, if you want to manage your time, these are the things that you do them, and you'll have more time in your hands. That's one level. But a more important level is energy management, because I could have all the time in the day, but if I've got no energy, nothing's going to get done. So a higher level of thinking about time is actually how you manage your energy. And when I've worked with other elite athletes, like there's a cyclist, I was working with some triathletes and some cyclists, and these guys were national champions. And elite sports people can be guilty of overtraining. You know, this is their passion, this is the thing that they do, they just want to do it again, again, again. And all the coaching in the health profession saying, no, you have to stop, and you have to do deep recovery. So you have to learn how to put a boundary around something and then allow your body to fully recover so that you can go back and then perform at a high level. So this bloke, he wouldn't listen to us. He wouldn't listen to his coach. Just, no, I'm just going. So he was overtraining, and he was in a training program. And what happens is this: is if your body is not fully in the zone because you've been overstretching muscles or extending them, you don't have the finesse that you do if you do deep recovery. So he's going around a corner. There's some gravel there. He doesn't have the finesse, if you like, with his body. He slips, he loses concentration for half a second, he slips, and he grazes one side of his body completely. He looks like he's just gone through a cheese grater. So 3 months off racing. He can't race for 3 months. And we're not sniggering at him, but we're kind of saying, well, we do tell you that you need to do some deep racing. So part of that is then how do you manage your energy? And one of the ways that I manage my energy, I live in an eco village here in Cronton Valley on the Gold Coast. So we're surrounded by nature. So if I'm doing a lot of brain stuff, head stuff, and I can feel my brain is getting full, I just walk around our hamlet amongst all the trees, the kangaroos, the koalas, etc., and that refreshes me. That gives me some deep rest. Then I can go back to work at a higher level than if I just soldier on and just keep on doing, which is absolutely stupidity because you don't get any further. So, what I teach my clients is that, get your time management organized, but also learn how to manage your energy. So when you do need to operate at a high level, you've got the mental, the emotional, and the physical, and even the spiritual reserves to be able to do that. And this is, I'm not teaching people rocket science. It's actually, in my view, because I've been around it for so long, dead easy. But I guess, you don't know what you don't know. And if, so really that's what I help my clients with. And it's so much fun, I've got to say. It's so much fun teaching a high-performing chief executive of a company to go get a hobby. Go do some gardening, learn to sing, make sculptures, whatever, get your hands dirty, because they're so out of the field, they've got all this important stuff to do. I'm going, no, you've got to be a 5-year-old. Go be a 5-year-old. That'll give you more energy to do the very important things that you're doing in the world.
Yeah, I love all of that. And I relate completely to what you were talking about just then, because we made a decision to move out of Sydney earlier this year. And so we're shifting between two places at the moment, and living the property that we've bought on the Central Coast outside of Sydney has one neighbour. And we look into bushland, and we know that there are deer. There's deers and wallabies and all sorts of things that are come along and visit over time, and you just get lost out there. And I know when exactly the scenario that you're talking about, and there are times that you just walk out into the garden, and it just completely changes the way you think and approach things. And I think being able to have that is so important, because many of us, and I imagine many of the CEOs that you talk to, were brought up with this culture of just keep working harder. That, you get into the office at 7:00 in the morning, you don't leave till 7:00 at night sometimes, and you go home and you do some more work in between. It's fascinating to me that people get so caught up in that, and they feel that need to conform to all of those things. And I think that being able to have a mechanism for switching off is so important, but it's rarely taught. And the same as that mechanism for, as you talked about before, about knowing when it's time to switch on and switch off certain things. So when you walk through the front door, you're dad, whereas when you walk out the front door, you're the CEO. Those little moments can make a difference, and you have to find that balance. And I think particularly a lot of people struggle with that in the working from home, that there's not the switch on, switch off mechanisms in place for that. And I imagine that's it's been an interesting period for the space that you've been in for the past 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and you're right, because more and more people are working from home. So how do you separate? Some people may have the luxury of having an office. So then there's that physical environment where they can, okay, this is where I'm doing the work that I do, and then outside of that. And so while it is trickier, it doesn't mean that it's impossible. One of the things that I encourage my clients to do is at the beginning of the week to talk to their family and their kids and work together saying, okay, these are the hours that I've got to do this. What are your school things that are going on, the concerts, sports, whatever it might be, and blend them together, integrate them together. And so the whole family can work out how their week is going to work like. And for some, it might be for sometimes that there's a high emphasis on getting work done because of whatever constraints are around there. There might be high urgency about something or high importance. But then there needs to be a negotiation that after this, rush hour of work, we spend more family time together. And so, and this you can also, and I encourage my clients to teach their kids win-win negotiation way before they get to be teenagers. And this is really interesting because, the kids become very good negotiators. Say, okay, well, if you do this, then I want this. And if you do this, but it might be, some listeners might think, well, that's a bit dangerous. But if they can become good negotiators, then it's easy. As long as you're all coming from how can we all win from this? Then there's give and take, there's listening. And the kids can learn a whole bunch of really valuable negotiating skills, which are life skills. They can use them for the rest of their lives. And when they get to be teenagers, then they also understand that it's not just me, as a lot of teenagers can think. It's like, how can we make it about us? And then there's a better way of coming to more reasonable negotiations about, what they want, what they don't want, et cetera, et cetera. So, it is trickier, but it's not impossible. And really, as I said before, the things that I'm teaching are not rocket science. I'm not that clever to be a rocket scientist. I like practical stuff, things that people can do. And one of my superpowers is making things that are complex into simple, from complex to simple, and with little things that people can do. And when families can, work together like this, that's great. There's so many learnings that go on all levels that it's just priceless.
Well, I should at this point mention my other daughter, my younger daughter, who is going to be listening to this podcast because she's the production editor of my podcast. And we thank you for doing that. But Maya was a master negotiator. When she was little, we never seemed to be able to leave the house without there being, I'll go if you get me this. These days, it's more like I'll go if I get a coffee. Then it's a little bit cheaper than it was in the earlier days, I think. But now it's a bit like, well, you'll get paid if you edit the podcast. So get cracking. So
Yes.
So this is my little nod to her now, listening in. But I wanted to ask you as well about, because I'm fascinated about the journey to getting through to all of this. And you touched on being a child without your father, which must have been challenging, I'm sure. Where did the career start? Because this is an area that obviously came to you later on. So where did you start off? Where was the original goal of where you were going before you graduated into this?
I don't know that there was a clear, it was more of a winding pathway, and over hill, over dale, and it's a windy thing. And I've been working at one of the health retreats here on the Gold Coast some years ago. And I'm very good at picking up patterns of where people are going, what's happening. And a lot of people, and often it would be successful men in whatever job or career that they're in. And they would talk about, I've got all these things, but why aren't I happy? I've got the helicopter, the cars, the house, the blah, 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 but I just feel empty. And that's often because they were disconnected from their heart. And so a whole variety of things came from that. And I was working with people in different ways. And then I came across this book called The Power of Full Engagement. And a friend of mine gave me this book and said, have a look at this. And it's by Jim Lear and Tony Schwartz. And so he talks about energy management. But what he's really talking about is another level of, you've probably heard of the term work-life balance. Well,
Yes.
The problem with that term is it kind of implies that things are equal, but it's not. It may have been in the days when we all worked 9 to 5 and that was it. And then you'd go home and you had your family, whatever, but that's changed like decades ago. But it's not a balance. It's more about, this is the important things that we're doing this week, whether it's in our family or whether it's in work, and how can we blend those things together. And I learned a lot from that book, and that's really the underpinning of much of the work that I've done. And I just found it so, for me, part of the buzz for the work that I do is to help people be 5-year-olds. And I'm talking about people in serious suits and, titles, etc. And when I've been doing workshops, if I can help, very serious, intelligent, high-performing people become little 5-year-olds, I reckon I've won. We've all won. So part of this has been helping them come back into their heart, not just into their busy, head or the things that they do, but to come from their heart. So that's really, I was going to say, the heart of my work is being in the heart, and it's true. That's what it's all about, and it just kind of evolved, So Anthony, I don't know about you. Did you, as a teenager, go, I want to be a podcast host? Because of course they didn't have podcasts. Well, of course you're on radio.
No,
that's
but
a different.
I'd have to say that my passion was radio, and okay. so gravitating into podcasting has been something of going back to that original idea of what I wanted to do, and radio has always been a passion of mine, and podcasting is the new version of that.
Yeah. So that's a really easy kind of transition. For me, it was more opportunities would come up and I'd, walk into that space and go, does this fit with where I am right now? And one of my early mentors, he said to me, this is my late 20s, and I was learning about a model called transactional analysis and Gestalt therapy and a whole bunch of, groovy modalities and personal development. And I noticed that a lot of people who work from 9 to 5, they'd leave their brains at home. They work from 9 to 5, and at 5 o'clock they come alive. And I'm thinking, what a waste of creativity, of life, of space. And John Barnaby, his name, he shared a word with us, and the word is plurk. So it's spelled P-L-E-R-K.
Right.
So the PL stands for play or pleasure.
Okay. Yep.
The RK stands for the work bit, paying mortgage, paying the bills, blah, 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 blah. And the E stands for enthusiasm, effort, excitement, energy, all those things, all the things that 5-year-olds are really good at doing. I'm going, wow, I don't want to work ever again in my life. I want to plug for the rest of my life. So that's been my emphasis, as if I'm doing something that I really love and my heart's in it, then that's where I need to be. And that's changed, working with different people. But that's always been at the core of what I've done. The format of how that happens has changed over the years and gone, I work with kids at risk and gifted kids and a whole variety of different things. But that thing about, coming from the heart and playing has always been there. The format's changed, but that's always been the constant.
I wanted to ask, how do people find you? And I don't mean in a literal sense of, yes, you're on.
Where do I live?
I mean, what drives people to want to engage with you in the first place? Is it people that are hearing about you working with other people, or how does, because it has to be an element of self-realization, I guess, to say, I really need someone like Bill in my life.
Yeah. Pain. People come to me in pain. It's not like going to a dentist where, there's going to be some physical pain. This is more emotional pain. And it's when they're sensing separation from their kids or their health, and a lot of men are not always that good at looking after their health. I'm fortunate for the last, yeah, pretty much most of my life, I have looked after my health. You wouldn't believe looking at me that I'm 99, would you? No, I'm not. I'm 5-year-old actually. So part of that is, when people feel separation, and it's usually in the dark hours of night when they're missing their kids, or they're racked with guilt because they've missed another school concert, or they're about to go away again and they see the look of disappointment in their child's eyes that they're not going to be there. And it's that emotional pain that basically they'll have their radar out for who can help me solve this bit, because they've got many things in their life that are going really well. It might be their career, some of the material things in life, perhaps, and status, whatever. But it's the things of the heart. And these are some of the soft skills that I've spent decades working with. And so that's my passion, that's my superpowers of having to help people find those things. And as I've said before, what I teach, what I share isn't rocket science. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. Well, at least from my perspective, because I've been around it for a long time. But I have to admit.
Well, I'd have to say, Bill, that's the understatement, because we all have these kind of so-called superpowers, don't we? And
Yes.
And things that come easy to us, you only realize after a while that what comes easy to you is often not easy to the next person, and that's your power is to be able to deliver that. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to ask you about the book, and listeners will not be able to see that there's Bill's got his book on display in the background there as well. But tell me a little bit about the book, How to Be Bulletproof from Criticism. How did it come about, and what's the what's the book? I mean, it seems like an obvious thing, but who's the book for?
Okay, so the book came again. So I've been going to men's gatherings for the last 10 years here in Queensland, and I always listen to conversations around the meal table, around the fire. And what I was hearing was a lot of men were saying that, they might be very successful, but, sometimes they just felt so raw and vulnerable if someone was criticizing them or what they'd done. And I'm going, there's a pattern here. And so, because I had 40 years of experience in a wide variety of different things, I picked up a few clues along the way. And I had an experience. I'll just briefly tell you a story here. When I was first training and speaking, and I was working with a group of special education teachers, and I was teaching about accelerated learning, the things that I know, that they didn't know. The room was full of people with master's degrees and PhDs in education, and I don't have a degree in education. So I was a bit cheeky, but they didn't know what I knew. It was in the second week, I think, that I was talking about the model of transactional analysis, and very briefly, it's like parent, adult, and child. And I made the statement that I didn't think it was a good idea for parents to use guilt, or teachers to use guilt, to get the kids to do things. Well, I don't know what it did to her, but it blew her fuse. And she just launched into the most vitriolic attack I've ever experienced in my life. Like, it was just full on Scud missile after Scud missile. So I'm hearing these. So I'm leading a workshop. There's 20 people in the workshop. Can you imagine if someone just laying into you, and it's getting quite personal? And so I remained calm. I did some internal emotional supporting on myself. And because of what I knew, I let her finish. And I asked her 2 questions. And basically, at those 2 questions, I had her in checkmate. She had nothing to say. So I'm not going to tell you what that is, because you'll have to read the book now. But these 2 questions were things that I knew. And so I knew how I had some visceral experience of being bulletproof from criticism. So the book, I've written 5 books. I reckon this is my best one. It's got so many bits of wisdom that I've gathered basically from my mentors. It's not my original stuff. This is stuff I've learned from others, but it's like put together my own stories and my own voice. And I love this book. It's such a neat book. It's like 2 hours of reading. But if, there's two places we can get criticism. It's either from other people or it's from ourselves. And for a lot of people, they are walking nightmares. If you were to read a transcript of what they say to themselves, you'd think it'd be a horror movie. People can be just so mean and nasty and vicious, and live with that all the time, going, wow, why'd you do that? Anyway, so that's the essence of the book. And, the show notes, I'll give a link where people can find that book. I love it. I love it.
And I love what you're saying about that. And we do have to wrap things up, but I think the interesting thing about that, about criticism of ourselves, is often that we can presume what other people might be thinking about us and take that on board. And that's become, I think, a rather large anxiety that a lot of people suffer from, is that they immediately assume that other people are thinking something when chances are they're not. And that internal criticism can be debilitating. And it is an important message for people to get through and understand. So definitely appreciate us having those details in the we'll put them in the show notes so people can get a hold of the book and the other books that you've written when we perhaps will talk about those on another occasion. But yes. I really wanted to thank you for being an amazing guest on the program. And, we talk about often with our guests about aha moments that our clients have. And I can just see that dancing around as a 5-year-old as being the one of the key aha moments. Either that or you're pushing them out of a plane. So one of the two. But
take a bit.
Thank you so much for being so generous and sharing so many stories, and really appreciate it. And we will, of course, give everyone the opportunity to get in touch with you and find out more in the show notes. Thank you for being on the podcast, Bill.
Thanks, Anthony. It's been heaps of fun.
And to everyone listening in, stay tuned for the next episode of Biz Bites. Biz Bites is brought to you by ComTogether. For all your marketing needs, so you can build your brand, engage audiences on multiple platforms, go to comtogether.com.au, follow the links to book an appointment for a free consultation.